Our story begins not with conflict, but with connection. Long before Ethiopia and Eritrea were separated by border lines and national flags, they were joined by one name, Aksum. The Aksumite Empire, one of the most powerful and sophisticated civilizations in the ancient world, rose from the highlands of the Horn of Africa and spread its influence across trade routes that reached from the Roman Empire to India. Aksum wasn't just a center of commerce, it was a spiritual giant. Under King Ezana in the 4th century, it became one of the first great empires to adopt Christianity. The empire minted its own coins, built sky-piercing obelisks, and carved churches into the very bones of the earth. Its people spoke the same language, worshipped under the same faith, farmed the same hills, fought the same enemies. There were no Ethiopians, no Eritreans, just Aksumites. One people, one soul, one destiny, but no empire lasts forever. As Aksum faded into history, unity gave way to division. Centuries passed. The world changed. European powers carved Africa into pieces. In 1890, Italy claimed Eritrea as a colony. Ports were seized, borders drawn, and a once integrated people were placed under colonial rule. But Ethiopia, under Emperor Menelik II, resisted. And in 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, Ethiopian warriors stunned the world by defeating a European army. Ethiopia remained free, the only African nation never to be colonized. While Eritrea was modernized with railways and Art Deco cities like Asmara, it was also militarized. Its men conscripted, its culture suppressed. The divergence was no longer spiritual or historical. It was real. It was political. It was enforced by bayonets and foreign flags. And though the two lands still shared kin and culture, they were now living separate fates. World War II ended Italy's colonial grip, but left Eritrea in limbo. Britain administered the region temporarily, but by 1952, the United Nations had made its decision. Eritrea would federate with Ethiopia. A compromise, a shared rule, a dual identity system. But compromise quickly turned into conquest. Within a decade, Ethiopia dissolved Eritrea's parliament, banned its language, erased its symbols. The federation was dead. Eritrea was annexed, and the betrayal was complete. In the eyes of Eritreans, their autonomy wasn't respected. It was crushed. And so began the long, slow burn of rebellion. From betrayal came resistance, and from resistance came war. In 1961, the Eritrean Liberation Front took up arms. They fought not for power, but for the right to exist on their own terms. By the 1970s, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, had become the face of the revolution. Disciplined, ideological, and deeply rooted in the people, they built a parallel society in the mountains. Schools, clinics, radio stations. Meanwhile, Ethiopia was imploding. The emperor was overthrown. The Marxist Derg took control, ushering in an era of terror and repression. The war became total. Ethiopia bombed villages. The EPLF dug tunnels. Inch by inch, Eritrea was reclaimed. In 1991, as the Derg collapsed, Eritrean fighters entered Asmara. After 3 decades of war, Eritrea had won its freedom. 2 years later, in 1993, Eritreans voted overwhelmingly for independence. The result was nearly unanimous. The world recognized the new country. Ethiopia formally accepted the outcome. Flags were raised. Embassies opened. Hope, it seemed, had finally arrived. Ethiopia and Eritrea began anew, as neighbors, as equals. But peace is a fragile thing, especially when borders are not clearly drawn. Badme, a small town on the shared frontier, barely a dot on the map. Yet it soon became a symbol of pride, of possession, of everything unresolved. Beneath the optimism of diplomacy, suspicion remained. Beneath the treaties and trade deals, the soil was still hot with memory. And history, as always, was waiting. In 1998, the simmering tensions exploded. The town of Badme, a name unknown to most of the world, suddenly became a flashpoint for one of the deadliest wars Africa had seen in decades. Eritrean troops entered the disputed area. Ethiopia mobilized. What began as a border skirmish erupted into a full-scale war.
I was not of the opinion that he was capable of invading us. I was not of the opinion that he was capable of stabbing us in the back. A lot of water has flown under the bridge since then, and that requires a review of attitudes and approach of the past.
For 2 years, tanks rumbled through rocky valleys. Fighter jets screamed over civilian towns. Trenches, reminiscent of World War I, scarred the landscape. Tens of thousands died. Entire communities were displaced. Neighbors who once shared water now spilled each other's blood. In 2000, the Algiers Agreement was signed. The fighting stopped, but the wounds had only deepened. An international border commission awarded Badme to Eritrea, but Ethiopia refused to let go. And so, the war ended. But the hostility did not. What followed was a Cold War without diplomacy, a frozen battlefield disguised as peace. From 2000 to 2018, the border remained closed. Soldiers on both sides stood in silence, fingers on triggers. Trade was cut off. Flights ceased. Letters never arrived. Families were